Yeah. So I think this kind of begs the question, and this isn't your area of specialty, but um, I think it begs the question: should we extend people's lifespan?
Sure, why not?
Well, I mean, okay, so here's a big issue right now in the U.S., and that's basically class warfare, where you have, um, a disproportionate amount of wealth being generated for the top. I'll say 1%, but it's really like 0.1%,
Yeah.
half percent, um, that have, so it's like the top 1% have 80% of the wealth in the U.S. Now, some form of, regardless of the economic system, often you end up with this dichotomy, this split where the top small percent has a large portion of wealth. So, if you extend life, then you have those same people continuing to exist um, for a longer period of time, which also allows their wealth to continue to compound because compounding interest, that nice exponential curve. And then you have the possibility of stagnation and a lack of innovation because there is no forced changeover in the changing of the guard in who's in charge by extending lifespan. So that's where I kind of wonder, you know, obviously, well, not maybe not obviously, but as a human being, I feel like I and probably many of us have this kind of innate drive to continue living as long as we possibly can, right? That seems like a natural characteristic. We want to be alive. Um, so it's like I get it in terms of that, thinking I want to live longer, I want to live as long as I possibly can. But I also think about, you know, what happens when things go wrong and we get unintended consequences. So that's kind of why I ask.
Sure, yeah, no, I totally get it. Like, and this is a legit, concern. At the same time, talking about governmental regulation, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we have that problem already, and
Right.
but you could look at it from a different angle too. You could say that you're not only extending the life of the 0.1% you're talking about, but you're also extending the life of, let's say, the next 20% that are highly
Mm-hmm.
capable, but not starting off with a billion in the bank account.
Right.
So you're giving those people more time to work with and to develop what they have. So you could also think that the proportions are going to shift in favor of the ones that are not in these like 0.1% of the
Mm-hmm.
wealthiest. So nobody really knows what's going to happen, obviously. So
Right.
far, history has told us that innovation actually has benefited humankind.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a time it has never been so good. Like it has never been that good as in the times we're living right now.
Right.
So there's no reason, and that came with technology, and it came with actually making our collective knowledge bigger and greater than it can be for individuals or even groups. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like starting with the book press, going way back, right?
Yeah.
Be able to write things down so that somebody else can read it and not only need to hear about it and forget it again, but like actually read it and maintain that kind of knowledge. That's the foundation for all these developments. And now it's obviously the internet and whatnot, Wikipedia, you name it, right?
Yeah.
So it's uh, collective knowledge that is pushing us way further that we would be if we didn't have these technologies and these advances. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my argument would be that any kind of um, innovation was actually, if any, was helping humankind, not disregarding that there have been major fallbacks and just talking about like nuclear fusions and bombs and you know but at the end of the day, we do have power, and I remember that the US has quite a few power plants that are nuclear driven.
Mm-hmm.
um, you wouldn't have that if that didn't happen. Yeah, it would
Mm-hmm.
have prevented two atomic bombs being dropped over Japan. But there's always going to be a trade-off for the good and for the worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is always going to shift towards the good because that's what we like inherently trying to do.
Right.
I'm an optimist in this regard.
There's my one of my mentors. There's a phrase for what you're describing is high tides raise all boats. So, and that's,
Yeah.
I personally subscribe to that philosophy, but I do see the counter philosophy where people just, say, like right now, that's very popular, especially with, kind of economic devastation that's going on at the moment, has intensified it. This idea about like eat the rich and, trying to overthrow this rich ruling class. I don't think you ever get rid of that, no matter what system you end up with, personally. Um, but it, I think it belies the fact that, like you mentioned, these innovations in technology end up benefiting everybody.
Yeah.
But I think it's easy, especially now with social media, and you have all these images of people driving around in Ferraris and stuff. And it's like, well, I can't afford a Ferrari. Why can't I afford a Ferrari? Then you feel bad. It's like this tendency towards pessimism that I think is natural for a lot of people, where it's like, I don't have what they have, so I must be doing poorly, because you can't really compare with even people 100 years ago. You didn't live then, you live now, and you really don't have a whole lot of connection to that time period to be like, oh, like I've got a washing machine, and you
Yeah.
know, I I can order food and have it delivered to my house, and
Sure. Yeah.
like
I agree
all
with
of these
you.
very nice services.
But that's an inherent trait of humankind, is not only
Right,
try to live as long as we can, it's also to compare all the time.
right,
We compare ourselves to anything and anybody,
yeah,
everybody all the time, and that's not always healthy, I would say. So
yeah,
just compare it to a former version of yourself. That would be a healthy way to approach it, because if you're doing better, then I guess you did something right?
yeah,
If not, well, maybe you want to change something. So
yeah.
yeah, but everybody has his or own approach to this kind of problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I come from a running background, and that is basically the crux of how a lot of my coaches approach running, where it's like, yes, you're running a race, you want to win, but somebody's going to win and everybody else is not. So you can either focus on that, or you can say, okay, last week I ran that time, and this week I'm 30 seconds faster or 20 seconds, whatever it is. So I'm personally improving. And their thought or philosophy was basically like, if you worry about what you are doing, the clock and the place will take care of itself.
Yes, sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So
Yeah,
I guess you need a healthy balance for
right,
both, right? I mean,
right.
obviously you can't always just compare your own times, right? It's not gonna
Right.
push you to the limits that sometimes necessary, especially in
Right.
like sports. Very nice transition, by the way, to to getting to
I've
this
done this
aspect
before.
of our chat. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, you have to compare yourself to others too, right? But that shouldn't be your major source of reward or regret, right?
Right.
So,
I think about when we compare, to me, it's almost a matter of saying, okay, when I compare, it gives me the idea of what is humanly possible. It doesn't necessarily give me an accurate portrayal of what's possible with my body, but I know that it could be possible. And the only way to find that out is to pursue it.
right, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, let's talk about handball.
sure.
Um,
Did you know what handball was
I
before?
did. I did. I went to look up the rules and stuff because it's been a while since I've seen anything handball related. I can't remember why. I feel like I watched like a short documentary or something on handball a couple of years ago, though I have no idea why, because it's not popular in the U.S. Just about at all.
Nope.
Uh,
Which is a
but
shame, by the way. It's a shame. It's such a nice sport.
well, it's like, yeah, I feel like it's a game too. So obviously, American football is hugely popular, and I always feel like the downfall of how popular it is, and because we're a sports obsessed nation, is that once people reach adulthood, nobody's playing American football as an adult anymore, unless you're a professional.
Yeah.
And there's only a very small amount of those people. And even those people, the average career in the NFL is like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
It's not very long. So if you specialized in that as a kid or growing up, well, now what do you do? Whereas like handball, although it's can be very aggressive, like you could play that longer into life than you can
Uh,
American. No,
no, not at all.
you don't think so?
No, average age when people retire from handball is also like 35.
Okay.
Sometimes the
Yeah, but
goalkeepers,
I'm talking about
yeah,
people are giving up on sport at 20.
yeah, that might be early. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't like finish at 20 if you're like professional.
Yeah, I'm not thinking like 80-year-olds are out there playing handball.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
just
no,
saying like
no. But like, it's also not 40-year-olds.
okay.
They retired too, except for some goalkeepers. That's the one like position
Yeah.
field. They're sometimes a little older,
Yeah.
but all the other ones they're usually you retire like 35, 38, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, why is it not popular in the US? I've asked myself this question for a long time, and I really haven't come to a good conclusion yet. I mean, everybody I show this sport, and not too many people know about it in the first place. Everybody I show this and introduce this sport to, they're fascinated. They love it.
Yeah.
It's fast, it's physical. You have a lot of goals, so there's a lot of score happening, right? It
Yeah.
changes
People like that.
it can change from a win, like a big win on one side, to a loss on that side within
Yeah.
5 minutes. So it has all the elements that one would like, actually, especially knowing the US
Yeah.
sport fanatics.
Yep.
So, and yet it really didn't take off in the US. I mean, there have been, I think, two spikes in
Hmm.
popularity when it comes to handball, and one was obviously after the Olympics,
Right.
because the American team did actually fairly well.
Hmm.
I mean, frankly, there is no reason to believe where Americans shouldn't be good at that sport. Yes,
Right.
they have no like history in the sense that they didn't play it for I don't know 100 years, but at the same time, you have fantastic athletes in the
Right.
U.S.
Right.
Why should they be able to play handball like we do in Europe, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but it's all about popularity. Some people have said that the lack of presence in day-to-day life and also in the media is that there are not enough breaks. So there can't be any commercials, and that's why TV stations are not so interested.
Yeah, but that's a poor argument, and
I
I'll
agree with
give you
that.
a reason why. Because now it has taken over 20 years, but like MLS here, so we're obviously call it soccer. You would just call it football, but I think some country. I don't remember which Germany. Does Germany use football or soccer? It's football, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
football.
because then different European countries. Some say soccer, most say football. And I get confused on who says what. I just default to football if it's Europe. Anyway, it's taken 20 some odd years from like league foundation to now, like, you know, like our team here in town. Um, we've had, and maybe it's been broken now, but we've had sold out stadium for 120 matches or something, which were just unheard of,
Yeah,
20 years ago.
yeah.
And so it's taken time, but there's no breaks. I mean, I guess there's injury breaks and that kind of thing, but generally speaking, there are not breaks aside from
Sure,
halftime
sure.
for soccer.
That's
So
very true. It's a good
there's
argument. But
yeah,
what they do, they have scholarships.
yeah,
They introduce it in schools as little as like the 4-year-olds are playing
yep,
it.
yep,
And they grow up with the sport, and then they have the opportunity to go to college and actually play soccer, right?
yep, yep.
So that's the foundation, obviously. And then, if enough people play it and are interested in it, then everybody else is going to pick it up too. I agree with that fully. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not.
So how do we introduce handball to the US? How do we get it integrated into the system?
Well, we have another good chance at the Olympics in LA in 2028, I guess.
Okay.
Now is the time to build the foundation to actually have coaches, facilities, schools, gyms,
Hmm.
plays, because there's going to be a run for handball after the Olympic Games in LA. And last time, the US was really not prepared for that kind of excitement when it came to handball. So
Hmm.
the spike basically, like, the curve flattened out, like to speak in Corona terms,
Right.
the curve flattened out really quickly, and so uh, all that interest got lost really quickly again, which is a shame. And right now, handball hasn't picked up that kind of spark in a long time. So there's a good chance 2028 to make that happen again, but it's preparing time now, and that starts with coaches, all the facilities, obviously, but referees just as much. Obviously, I have to talk about referees, being one myself.
Right.
And actually, nobody talks about referees. They're there too, the kind of necessary evil. But guess what? There is no game without referees.
Right.
So you have to think about these kind of things too. And I just hope that they work on that really closely and with smart people making that happen.